The American West is a cemetery of hope. A small, wooden porch stands against the brutal, unrelenting silence. Every afternoon, as the sun bleeds into the horizon, a figure emerges. He is a man carved from regret and the hard earth, his existence distilled into a singular, obsessive ritual. He doesn't live. He simply waits. His aging eyes, fixed on a solitary, dusty road, are searching for a miracle the desert refuses to deliver. Years have vanished into the relentless heat, but the worn spot on the porch remains his anchor. He holds a memory tighter than life itself, defying logic, defying time. A monument of paternal devotion, clinging to the faint possibility of one returning dust cloud. The sun, a dying coal behind the vast, bruised western sky, began its slow, inevitable surrender. It was the only constant rhythm left in my life, that perfect, agonizing transition from light to shadow, the hour I had come to define my remaining existence. I settled into the familiar groove, worn into the worn wooden porch, the wood soft and splintered beneath my calloused hands. This porch, facing west onto County Route 49, was more than just structure. It was my ship, anchored precariously in an ocean of dust and stubborn, useless hope. It is 2024 now. 7 years. 7 years since the drought settled in my heart, as surely as it had settled over this cracked earth. I am Jedediah Thorne, 78, and the years have etched themselves onto me with the brutal honesty of the desert wind. My skin is the color and texture of old forgotten leather. My spine, though still straight enough to defy the total collapse that age threatens, carries the permanent weight of an unanswerable question. My eyes, once the clear blue of a mountain lake, are now fixed and perpetually sad, strained daily against the horizon, searching for a ghost of movement, a plume of dust that means everything. The ritual began, as always, with the placement of the brimmed Stetson. I never wore it during the vigil. It rested meticulously, perfectly centered on my lap, the crown flattened by years of routine. It was a symbol of a life waiting to resume, a life put on hold the minute Quentin Vance, 32, my son, my restless, independent boy, rove away, unannounced, back in 2017. The silence here, at the Dust Bowl, hold fast, is not peaceful. It is a presence, heavy and judgmental. It presses in from all sides, amplifying the whisper of the wind as it shaves layers off the peeling paint of the house and sifts the fine grit across the floorboards. I listen at the wind, sometimes thinking I can hear the distant, hollow sound of an engine in its roar, a sound that always resolves back into the nothingness. I remember Quentin's departure vividly. Not the sound of the engine fading, because I wasn't there to hear it, but the silent, empty space he left behind. The house seemed to sigh, drawing a deep, dry breath when it realized one of its inhabitants would not be returning for supper. I was out checking the last pitiful water tank when he went, a note, brief and almost careless, left on the kitchen counter. "Gotta see what's out there, Pop, back soon." Soon became 7 years. I run a thumb over the crease of the Stetson. It smells faintly of sweat, sun-bleached wool, and a peculiar mineral scent of this arid country. I hadn't worn it properly since the day I realized soon was a lie I was willing to live for. The hat is my tether to sanity, a small pocket of order in the chaos of unresolved paternal devotion. The sun dips lower, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and bruised purple. The light plays tricks on my tired eyes. Every fence post becomes a distant figure. Every tumbleweed bouncing across the asphalt-stripped gravel of County Route 49 transforms, for a heart-stopping second, into the silhouette of a man walking, tired but finally home. This road, County Route 49. It is the artery of my grief. It stretches out, a single, unyielding line of tan dirt and pale gravel, disappearing into the heat haze until it meets the horizon, where the sky and the earth merge into indistinguishable blue-gray. It's rarely used, which makes the wait all the more crushing. Weeks can pass without so much as a government pickup or a farmer hauling hay. When people asked a few times, people dare to breach my isolation. Usually a deputy or a stray census taker. They ask why I don't move closer to civilization. Why not Dry Creek Junction? Dry Creek Junction is a ghost of a town 20 miles south. Just a cluster of sun-bleached buildings, a defunct gas station, a general store that opens only when the owner feels like it. But even that is too much noise, too much distraction. My vigil requires solitude. It requires the relentless silence of the holdfast. If Quentin were to return, he would come to this spot. He wouldn't look for me in the lukewarm clamor of a dying town. He would look for his father, Jedediah Thorne, right here, anchored to the porch. I pull out Quentin Vance's faded photograph. It is a small black and white portrait, creased at the edges, warmed smooth by years of handling. Quentin's eyes, intense and shadowed even in the photo, stare back at me. He was tall, lean, with light brown hair that always seemed to defy a comb. He possessed an inherent restlessness, a trait I hadn't understood when I was younger, busy carving a stubborn life out of this harsh land. Now I see it clearly. He was born with wings I tried to clip, and when he finally flew, I was left grounded, staring up at the empty sky. The years have blurred the focus of the photograph, but not the memory. In the picture, taken perhaps a year before he left, there is a hint of impulsiveness in his smile, a nervous energy that suggested he was always ready for the next thing, the next horizon. Did he find it? Or did the West, the unforgiving, silent West, swallow him whole, just like it consumes everything that isn't rooted deep enough? I press the photograph to my chest, a quick, painful gesture. I allow myself only in the deepest throes of the dusk's isolation. This is the definition of my love. Stubborn, agonizingly resilient, defying all reason. I know the odds. I know what the police reports implied, what the town whispered when they thought I couldn't hear. But logic means nothing when pitted against the fundamental law of a father's heart. The air chills rapidly now that the sun is gone. The sky turns a deep, velvety indigo, pierced by the first sharp pinpricks of light. It is beautiful, this death of the day, but it is also a reminder that another 24 hours have slipped past without resolution. I start running through the memories, the well-worn grooves of joy and regret. The time Quentin Vance taught himself to fix the old Massey Ferguson tractor by reading schematics under a kerosene lamp. The time he drove me 20 miles in a blizzard because I'd broken my arm checking fences. Simple moments, solid memories that prove he was real, that he existed outside of this faded picture. These memories are the fuel for the daily dusk vigil. The wind shifts, carrying with it the faint metallic scent of ozone, promising nothing more than a continued drought. I adjust the brimmed Stetson on my lap, feeling the familiar weight. My grip on the armrests of the worn wooden porch tightens. I am a statue now, waiting for the miracle. Then it happens. It is not the wind, nor the internal echo of my own longing. It is a distinct, low thrummer sound that vibrates through the earth and up into the soles of my boots. My entire body snaps rigid, an involuntary muscular reaction I haven't been able to control for 7 years. The sound is faint, perhaps 2 miles off, down County Route 49. It's coming from the south, from the direction of Dry Creek Junction. My heart, an old tired engine that usually ticks over steadily, suddenly seizes, then hammers against my ribs with furious intensity. My breath hitches in my throat. I drop the photograph into the crown of the Stetson, unable to look away from the road. This is the moment of pure, blinding adrenaline. The culmination of 7 years of expectation. My 78-year-old eyes strain, blurring the distance, trying to pierce the gathering gloom. I lean forward, hands gripping the wood so tightly, the splinters dig into my flesh. I don't feel the pain. All I feel is the absolute, terrifying possibility. Please, let it be him. A minute passes, an eternity measured in heartbeats. The thrum grows slightly louder, less like a distant drone, and more like the unmistakable sound of a combustion engine laboring on a gravel road. And then I see it. A pale, yellowish plume of dust erupts on the horizon, thick and distinct against the darkening sky. It's not the thin scatter of wind-blown sand. This is agitated earth, kicked up by tires, moving with purpose. The dust cloud grows rapidly, indicating speed. My vision, usually so unreliable, sharpens into a focused tunnel. I can almost make out the shape beneath the dust. A vehicle, probably a truck or an older model sedan, moving fast. I try to stand, but my legs are stiff, momentarily paralyzed by shock and exhilaration. I manage to push myself upright, leaning heavily on the porch railing, breathing raggedly. This is it. After years of listening to the lies of the wind, after years of silence, something is truly coming. The vehicle gains definition. It is a dark shape, likely an older Ford or Chevy sedan, battered and clearly suffering from the road. It approaches the 2-mile mark, then the 1-mile mark. My throat constricts. I can almost make out the gleam of headlights reflecting off the swirling dust. I raise a hand, ready to wave, ready to shout a name I haven't spoken aloud without a tremor in years. Quentin. The vehicle closes in, tires spitting gravel. It's close enough now that I can see the details. It's a road-weary sedan, overloaded perhaps, or just poorly maintained. And through the grime-streaked windshield, I see the driver. The moment hits me with the force of a physical blow, a sudden, devastating decompression of hope. The driver is a young man, early 30s, wearing a baseball cap backward. He has a passenger, a woman with bright pink hair, laughing as they bounce over the uneven road. Behind the driver, I can clearly make out stacked boxes, cheap plastic containers, and a small sign taped to the rear window. Midwest Wholesale Goods, Tools and Trinkets. It is the passing of the traveling salesman, an event rare enough to shatter the routine, but ultimately mundane enough to crush the spirit entirely. The car, oblivious to the decades of pain it just momentarily resurrected, accelerates past the dust bowl hold fast. The driver gives a quick, disinterested lift of 2 fingers off the steering wheel, a casual greeting to the strange old man standing, rigid, on his dilapidated porch in the middle of nowhere. The car is gone in a flash, swallowed by the dust cloud it created. The noise fades almost as quickly as it arrived, replaced by a terrible, ringing silence. I stand there gasping, my chest heaving as if I'd just run a mile. The adrenaline surge crashes, leaving behind a cold, viscous dread. My hands start to tremble violently. My knees give out, and I sink back down onto the worn wooden porch, narrowly missing dropping the brimmed Stetson. The dust cloud lingers for a full 5 minutes, a mocking, golden shroud hanging over County Route 49. It is the residue of false hope. My eyes track the settling dust until the road is once again just an empty ribbon leading to nowhere. I had felt it, tasted it, that glorious, foolish certainty that the waiting was over. And it was just some kid trying to sell cheap wrenches 50 miles past the last sign of civilization. The exhaustion that follows such an emotional peak is profound. It feels like the years have suddenly accumulated, pressing down on my 78-year-old frame. I sit for a long time, the remnants of the heat escaping the earth beneath me, the cold night air settling in. I pick up Quentin Vance's faded photograph from the Stetson's crown. I hold it tightly, running my thumb over his intense, captured gaze. He looks so solid here, so real. How could something so solid simply vanish? I lean back against the porch railing, the rough wood digging into my back, a welcome grounding sensation. I look back toward the house. The Dust Bowl holdfast stands as a testament to my obstinacy, a sun-bleached silhouette against the star-dusted velvet sky. It is just as battered and resilient as I am. The truth is simple, harsh, and utterly undeniable. I am still here. I am still waiting. This vigil, the daily dusk vigil, is no longer about predicting Quentin's return. It is about defying his absence. If I stop waiting, if I leave the worn wooden porch and allow that patch of County Route 49 to become just another stretch of desolate land, then I admit defeat. I admit that the silence of the West has won. But my love is a powerful force, stubborn and resilient, defying all logic and the crushing weight of time. It is the only thing I have left to offer. It is the only reason I wake up and see the sun rise over the eastern plains, knowing that when the sun sets again, I must be ready. My vision is failing, my body is failing, but my commitment remains intact. I replace the faded photograph in the safety of my pocket. I adjust the brimmed Stetson back onto my lap. The air is still, save for the persistent, lonely whisper of the wind. I know, deep in the aching center of my 78-year-old heart, that the road is empty. I know that the next sound I hear will likely be the wind, or perhaps the lonely howl of a coyote. But I will wait. I must wait. Because if, against all the impossible odds of the universe, Quentin Vance ever drives back down that dusty ribbon of road, his father, Jedediah Thorne, will be the last living monument to paternal devotion he sees, ready to finally put his life back on. Until then, I am tethered to this spot, suspended in the single, desperate possibility of a miracle that will break this lonely cycle of dust, wind, and waiting. This desolate highway is the altar of my hope, and I refuse to leave it unattended. The tremor in my hands did not immediately subside. It was an electrical echo of the moment, a residual current of false resurrection that had coursed through my ancient system. The silence that returned after the traveling salesman's battered sedan vanished was not the neutral silence of the desert. It was a pressurized vacuum, sucking all remaining warmth and certainty from the air. I stayed slumped on the worn wooden porch, leaning my head against the splinters of the railing. The scent of hot engine oil and disturbed dust brief, urban-y and entirely alien to this landscape, was already dissipating, swallowed by the vast, clean emptiness. I had been here 7 years, anchored to this structure, yet, in the 30 seconds it took for that worthless car to roar past, I became a different man. I was younger, vibrant, my heart hammering with the possibility of the ultimate reversal. And then, I was older than my years, broken again by the simple, cruel reality of transit. These moments, these brief, agonizing flirtations with resolution, were far worse than the prolonged, monotonous certainty of emptiness. The monotony, at least, allowed the soul to calcify. The interruption ripped the scar tissue clean off. I looked down at the brimmed Stetson still resting on my lap, cradling Quentin's faded photograph. I hadn't even taken the picture out of the hat. I hadn't needed the physical reminder when the real thing seemed imminent. That was the core delusion, that I could ever mistake a cheap roadside peddler for my son. But in the twilight, when the light plays its final, cheating games, the mind grasps at shadows, creating substance where there is only air. I reached out and picked up a handful of the fine, powdery dirt that the wind had deposited onto the porch floor. It was the color of old bone. This earth had consumed everything: water, crop, hope. And perhaps Quentin, too. I remembered the deputy who came out 3 months after the departure. He wasn't unkind, just pragmatic, bearing the weary face of someone who deals exclusively in incomplete stories. Head leaned against the porch railing, right where I was now, and studied the horizon. "Jedediah," Head said, his voice low, respectful of the impending finality of the conversation. "We've logged the vehicle. We've pinged the banks. We've interviewed every hitchhiker and trucker between here and the Colorado border. People don't just disappear. They either decide to stay gone or, well, you know." I knew. The desert was a vast, efficient grave. It didn't need to bury you deep. The sun and the scavengers did the work of erasure perfectly well. But I rejected the deputy's conclusion then, and I reject it now. Quentin didn't just decide to stay gone. He promised he'll be back soon. And Quentin, despite his restlessness, was not a liar. He was impulsive, yes, but fundamentally honest. I look at the photograph again, the face blurred by time and touch. Quentin, cool, built like a fence post, constantly leaning slightly forward as if straining to hear a sound miles away. He had that peculiar intensity in his gaze, a focus that sometimes bordered on panic. He wasn't made for the stillness of the Dust Bowl holdfast. He was energy-seeking friction. We were always fundamentally mismatched, 2 planets orbiting the same failing sun. I, Jedediah, carved out of the stubborn, immobile rock of this land. He, Quentin, liquid and constantly seeking a new channel. It was this incompatibility that fed the sharpest memory, the one I kept locked away beneath the layers of nostalgic good times. It was the memory that contained the true weight of his absence. I close my eyes, and the darkness behind my lids turns not into rest, but into the glaring yellow light of the kitchen on the night before he left. The sound of the crickets outside the window was deafening, amplified by the tension between us. It was late, past midnight. I had been working on the accounts, or what little accounts there were left to manage on a farm that hadn't seen a decent yield in 3 years. Quentin was standing by the stove, nursing a coffee cup, but he wasn't drinking it. He was dressed in his heavy canvas coat, already looking like he was ready to face the long road. "I'm done, Pop," Head said, without preamble, looking at the faded linoleum floor, avoiding my eyes. I remembered the way my heart seized, a cold knot tightening beneath my ribs. I hadn't asked what he meant, because I already knew. The phrase had been hanging in the air for months, a threat more constant than the drought. "Done with what exactly?" I asked, forcing a calm tone, though my voice sounded brittle, like dried twigs snapping. He finally looked up, and his intense blue eyes, the same sad blue as mine, only 7 decades younger and burning with frustration, locked onto my face. "Done with waiting for rain that won't fall. Done with watching this place crumble into dust. Done with the ghosts of what this farm used to be. It's killing you, Pop, and it's sure as hell killing me." I had slammed the ledger shut on the table. The sound echoed in the quiet house, a harsh, declarative note. "This is your home, Quentin. It's been home for 4 generations. We don't abandon home because the going gets tough." "Tough?" He laughed, a short, bitter sound devoid of humor. "We're past tough, Jedediah. We're in the sustained decomposition phase. You sit on that porch every night, waiting for a market correction or a cloudburst. I'm waiting for life to start." This was the crux. He saw the vigil even then, the way I was already beginning to retreat into the ritual of waiting, even if back then it was only for the bills to clear, or for the irrigation pump to finally work. He saw the pattern of stasis I was imposing, a pattern that required his complicity. "What kind of life do you think is out there, son?" I challenged him, standing up, putting my hand on the back of my chair, steadying myself. "You think the cities are paved with gold? They're paved with broken promises and things that will burn out your soul faster than the sun out here. Maybe. But they move. They change. They have possibilities. Look around, Pop. The only thing that moves here is the wind, and it's just dragging the dirt in circles." He was right, of course. His truth was younger and sharper than my own. But admitting his righteousness meant admitting my own failure to make the farm thrive, failure to offer him a future worth staying for. "You have obligations here," I insisted, the old stubborn refusal taking root in my throat. "To me, to this land, to your lineage." He shook his head, a gesture of profound weariness. "My only obligation is to keep breathing, and I can't do that here anymore. I'll make something of myself, something solid, and then I'll be back. I'll show you that there's life outside the Dust Bowl. Hold fast. And if you fail..." He picked up his keys from the counter, the jangle a sudden, discordant sound in the stillness. He finally met my eyes, and there was a painful resolution there. A look that acknowledged the impending separation, but refused the guilt. "If I fail alone, Jedediah. But I won't spend my life failing slowly with the land." He walked out then, leaving me standing in the yellow light of the kitchen. I heard the truck start, a rough, loud cough in the early morning stillness. I didn't go after him. My pride, carved from the same rough material as this land, held me rigid. I watched the shadows of his headlights cut across the dry yard, and I listened to the sound of the engine diminish until it was replaced by the relentless, mocking chirping of the crickets. That silence, that specific, final silence, was what broke me. He didn't leave the note until the sun was rising, hours later. He must have doubled back, or maybe he wrote it before he left, and I simply missed the timing. "Gotta see what's out there, Pop. Back soon." The note was a lie, a merciful fabrication designed to soften the blow of the real conversation. The truth was, He left because I wouldn't let him leave the right way. I wouldn't bless his departure. And so he left in defiance. I reopened my eyes on the worn wooden porch, gasping slightly, as if the memory itself had been a physical exertion. That was the last true conversation we had, a battle of wills between the earthbound father and the aspiring air traveler. The fear that grips me in these late hours is not the fear that Quentin is dead. It is the crushing, humiliating fear that he is alive, that he found what he was looking for, and that he hasn't returned because he is finally, truly happy, and that happiness exists entirely outside of the arid boundaries of my life. I force myself to stand again. The physical act of rising is always a labor, a slow unfolding of stiff joints and protesting muscles. But I must perform the secondary vigil now, the internal check on the integrity of the shrine. The Dust Bowl holdfast is not just where I live. It is a reliquary, a monument to the year 2017. I walk slowly, the sound of my worn boots scraping against the porch wood loud in the heavy night air. I step inside the house. The house smells of dust, old wood, and the faint preserved scent of my son's life. I refuse to change anything that doesn't absolutely require maintenance. The calendar on the kitchen wall is still turned to the month of his departure. The pots he used for the last meal he cooked, a meager stew of dry farm potatoes and smoked hammer, still hung on the hooks above the stove, unused since. The isolation here is absolute. Dry Creek Junction is 20 miles away, a cluster of flickering neon signs and the distant, muffled sound of a single slow train passing through. If I moved there, I could have company, distraction, the illusion of moving forward. But the move would require me to disassemble the shrine, to admit that the waiting had failed. I head down the narrow hallway toward Quentin's room. This room, more than the porch, is the heart of my resistance. I push open the door. It doesn't creak. I oil the hinges every month. The air inside is cooler, heavier. The room is small, functional. A single iron bedstead, a worn pine dresser, a stack of old textbooks, and the map. The map, tacked to the wall above the desk, is what catches my gaze. It's a road map of the American West, old and brittle. When he left, I didn't notice it immediately. But when I came into his room days later, I saw the pinpricks. Dozens of tiny red map pins, marking places: Denver, Salt Lake City, Portland, Seattle. They formed a constellation of aspirations, stretching far beyond the narrow ribbon of County Route 49. It wasn't just a physical distance he wanted to cover. It was a philosophical one. I walk over and run a finger along the line of pins that seem to trace a tentative, exploratory route toward the Pacific Northwest. He never made it to the coast, the deputy suspected. The last documented ping from his phone was near a small town in eastern Wyoming, about 5 days after he left. After that, silence. I turn my attention to the dresser. On the top, tucked neatly away, is a cigar box. I lift the lid. Inside are his childhood treasures, a handful of arrowheads we found down by the dry riverbed, a coiled, stiff rattlesnake skin, and a handful of foreign coins had collected from the few travelers who passed through years ago. I pick up one of the arrowheads, rubbing its smooth, cool edge. He was 10 when we found this, his face bright with the thrill of discovery. It's those moments, those solid, uncorrupted memories, that I use to fight back the current of despair. They remind me of the fundamental goodness of the boy who left, a goodness that I believe would prevent him from simply abandoning me without a word unless he truly couldn't help it. I sink onto the edge of his bed. The mattress is still firm. I keep the plastic covering on it now, protecting it from the dust. The weight of the 7 years settles on me fully. It is not just the grief of loss, but the grief of sustained, unchangeable routine. Every sunrise demands the preparation for the vigil. Every sunset delivers the confirmation of failure. My existence is defined by this perfect, agonizing loop. I remember once reading about ancient sailors who, lost at sea, would tie themselves to the mast during a storm. I am that sailor. The dust bowl holds fast is my mast, and the storm is the silence of the west. I am tethered to this location, to the worn wooden porch, because if I break the chain, I drift away completely, lost in the overwhelming ocean of history and forgetfulness. My sight is growing worse, the world softening at the edges like an old, overexposed photograph. I know one day I will sit on that porch and no longer be able to distinguish a dust plume from the rising heat haze, or a real engine from the internal, phantom sounds of memory. But even then, I will sit. My physical presence will be the signal. I walk out of Quentin's room, closing the door softly, leaving the relics of his past undisturbed. Back in the main room, I approach the single window facing County Route 49. The moonlight is strong now, turning the gravel road into a pale, ghostly path. It looks impossibly long, stretching out into a cold, indifferent infinity. I see my reflection in the glass, Jedediah, carved from dry leather and bone, eyes fixed and sad, framed by the silent darkness of the homestead. I am a relic of persistence. I think of the traveling salesman, already dozens of miles away, perhaps stopping in Dry Creek Junction for a cold beer, oblivious to the emotional devastation his passage caused. Life moves on for everyone else. For me, life is still waiting for the starting gun of a homecoming. I move into the kitchen and perform the necessary maintenance for survival. I boil water on the small gas burner. The electric lines are too unreliable. I make a strong cup of black coffee, the bitterness a necessary contrast to the sweetness of the perpetual hope I maintain. As I drink, I lean against the counter, surveying the kitchen. The stillness is deafening. In the cities Quentin sought, there would be sirens, traffic, human chatter. Here the loudest sound is the beat of my own heart, a slow, methodical drum in the vast quiet. I consider the possibility of a different reality. What if Quentin returned and I wasn't there? The fear sends a jolt through me, sharp and immediate. If he drove down County Route 49 and saw the porch empty, saw the house dark and shuttered, he might turn round thinking I had given up, that I had chosen the ease of moving to Dry Creek Junction, or, God forbid, the ease of death, over the inconvenience of waiting. That thought is intolerable. It reinforces my primary mandate: stay. The vigil is my final act of paternal love, my silent apology for the pride that kept me cemented to the kitchen floor when he walked out that night. By sitting on that porch, I am telling the universe, I am telling Quentin, that I never stopped being his father. And I never stopped being his father, and I never stopped believing in his return, regardless of what the facts suggest. A slow, relentless invasion. I finish the coffee and wash the mug, the sound of the running water, a brief, sharp noise in the quiet. I climb the narrow staircase to my bedroom. I don't undress. I rarely do. It seems unnecessarily optimistic to settle in completely when the call could come at any moment. I simply lie down on the hard mattress, pulling the rough woolen blanket up to my chin. I do not pray for his safety anymore. That seems too small, too selfish. I pray for the strength to endure the silence. I pray that my eyes hold out. I pray that the porch railing doesn't rot away before the miracle happens. I close my eyes again. Sleep is a thin, watery thing, easily broken by the slightest sound. My subconscious is perpetually tuned to the south, to the direction of County Route 49. I listen, even in the darkness, for the phantom thrum, the sound of gravel spitting, the distant cough of an engine slowing down, finally stopping. The darkness of the night is absolute, but I know precisely where I am. I am in the Dust Bowl, hold fast. 7 years and one devastating false alarm past the point of no return. The hours pass with the slow, grinding monotony of sand slipping through an hourglass. I manage a few hours of uneasy rest, punctuated by the internal jolts of half-formed dreams where Quentin is young again, standing in the sunlight, asking me to teach him how to drive the tractor. When the first pale wash of dawn begins to appear in the eastern window, I am already awake. The air is frigid. I rise, moving quietly, carefully, protecting the stillness of the house. The new day smells exactly like the old one, dry, cold, and immensely patient. The sun will rise, crawl across the vast, empty sky, and begin its slow, predictable descent. And when the light softens, when the shadows stretch long and deceitful across the baked earth, I will be ready. I go downstairs and look out the window one last time before making my breakfast of hard biscuits and bitter coffee. County Route 49 is exactly as I left it, empty, dusty, and unmoving. I think about the absurdity of my life. A man nearly 80 years old, dedicating his final years to a stationary vigil, defying the fundamental law of nature, which dictates that life should seek continuity and change. But my continuity is this waiting. My change will only happen when Quentin returns. I feel the familiar weight of the responsibility. I am the final keeper of the flame, the last monument to a love that refuses to be extinguished by probability or by time. The desert wind begins to whisper, a low, sighing sound that offers no information, no comfort, only the vast indifference of the landscape. I am Jedediah, and I am here. I am waiting. This silent, desolate highway is the altar of my hope, and I refuse to leave it unattended. I am not simply waiting for a man. I am waiting for the broken promise of my life to be mended, defying the crushing, consuming silence of the West, one sunset at a time. My vigil is my truth, and I will maintain this post until I can no longer breathe, or until the dust cloud that matters finally appears on the horizon. The day itself is an obstacle course I must navigate to reach the sacred hour of the vigil. The wait is the true burden. The vigil is the release. My first task, as always, was the maintenance of the environment. I call it maintenance, but it is really a carefully constructed denial of decay. The truth is, everything here is eroding: the wood, the soil, my sight, my patience. But I counter decay with ritualistic cleanliness. I swept the grit that had blown in under the front door overnight. It was a Sisyphean task. The desert is infinitely patient and infinitely generous with its refuse. I gathered the fine, bleached powder into an old tin shovel and dumped it outside, where the wind would immediately seize it and redeposit it elsewhere. While sweeping, I caught sight of myself in the long, warped mirror that hangs in the hall, a necessity from the time when we occasionally had visitors. Jedediah, gaunt, framed by the rigid posture of a man fighting gravity and history simultaneously. The sadness in my eyes is not a passive emotion. It's an active, burning thing, consuming the remaining resources of my life. While filing, I uncovered a small tin box beneath a pile of rusty tools. It was his. I recognized the faint, scratched signature on the lid, QV. I hadn't seen this in years. My hands paused, the rhythmic shee of the file against the metal ceasing abruptly. I opened the box. Inside was a small collection of sketches, not of animals or machines or the landscape, but of abstract lines and shapes, frantic bursts of energy captured on cheap notebook paper. They were restless drawings. One sketch, done in thick black charcoal, depicted a single straight line, County Route 49. No doubt being violently shattered by a jagged bolt of lightning, the fragments flying outward into a great emptiness. This was the core of Quentin's spirit, laid bare, a desire not just to leave, but to shatter the monotony. He didn't want a quiet escape. He wanted a violent, definitive break. Seeing this fueled a new wave of old guilt. I had always tried to anchor him, to make him understand that stillness was strength, but he interpreted stillness as stagnation. I was the rock, and he was the wave, destined to break against me. Did he leave only because he felt he had to destroy what held him? I closed the box, the small, sharp snap of the lid echoing the finality of his departure. I returned the box exactly where I found it. I will not make a shrine out of this workshop. The house is enough. By noon, the sun was high, bleaching the sky to a painful white. It was too hot to be outside, too bright to see anything clearly. This middle part of the day, the time when the light is most honest, is the hardest to bear. The desert reveals its true character, unforgiving, empty, and brutally clear. There are no illusions in this light. I ate a simple mile-a-teen of beans, cold. I sat not in the kitchen, but on the step leading down into the cellar. It was cooler there, and the low ceiling offered a kind of psychological compression that felt momentarily safe. I didn't want to look out the window. I wanted to conserve the sight and the hope for the evening. During this oppressive midday stillness, the true weight of my isolation presses in. Dry Creek Junction is 20 miles away. 20 miles of silence. When the deputy came 7 years ago, he asked if I wanted to stay in touch, if I wanted a phone line re-established. I declined. The only call I want to receive is the one I want getting, the sound of an engine drawing near. Any other connection to the outside world would dilute the pure, focused energy of my vigil. I am often haunted by the thought of what I missed during those years: marriages, deaths, national crises. The world has moved on, accelerated, spun itself into new configurations. But here, 2017 remains the axis. My life is a stalled engine, waiting for the one mechanic who can restart it. The walk was arduous. The dry, cracked earth resisted my worn boots. The dust bowl, hold fast, sits on a slight rise, and walking down into the hollow where the well lies offers a different, stark perspective of County Route 49. From the porch, the road is a distant line of possibility. From the hollow, I can see it clearly for perhaps half a mile in either direction, a brutal scar of baked clay and gravel. I reached the well and began the work of greasing the ancient, rusty pump handle. The metal was scalding hot from the afternoon sun. As I worked, pumping the handle up and down in slow, agonizing strokes, I thought of Quentin's intensity. He never understood the slow rhythm of the land. He wanted immediate action, immediate reward. "You gotta learn patience, son," he told him once, when he was tearing apart a sputtering carburetor with undue haste. "Patience is just another name for surrender out here," Pophead countered, wiping grease from his brow. "The land's got patience, and look what it does. It just sits and waits until we're all dust." His philosophy was the opposite of mine. I believe patience is the highest form of resistance. He believed action, even reckless action, was the only way to prove you were alive. I finished the greasing and stood back, wiping my hands on my canvas trousers. I looked toward the road. The heat haze was shimmering, distorting the horizon. It made the road look like water, a cruel optical illusion that happens every day. It often creates phantom shapes, a truck, a shadow, a shimmering outline of a man walking, only for the heat to shift, revealing nothing but the baked emptiness. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the heavy silence. It wasn't an engine. It was a rhythmic clacking, low, mechanical, and unfamiliar. My heart immediately clenched. I stood rigid, ignoring the sweat that stung my eyes. After 7 years, my ears had become acutely specialized instruments, able to filter out the common sounds of the desert, the wind, the cicadas, the distant cry of a hawk, and isolate anything manufactured, anything human. The sound seemed to be coming from the west, the direction that leads directly to Dry Creek Junction. It grew louder, a steady, deliberate clack, clack, clack. Too slow for a car, too high-pitched for a large truck. My mind raced through possibilities. Farm equipment, but nothing runs this far out anymore. A lone traveler. I scrambled up the slight incline out of the hollow, abandoning the well, driven by a sudden violent surge of adrenaline. I reached the crest and shielded my eyes against the late afternoon glare, and then I saw it. It wasn't Quentin. It wasn't any kind of vehicle. It was a man on a bicycle. He was old, older than me even, impossibly frail, wearing strange, brightly colored clothes, not desert colors, and he was pedaling slowly, painfully, his meager belongings strapped to a rack over the rear wheel. The sound was the chain grinding against the gears and the loose fittings rattling on the ancient machine. He was directly on County Route 49, moving at a snail's pace. My initial blinding flash of hope, the instantaneous delusional leap that this must be him, he gave up the truck. He decided to ride home, collapsed instantly into a crushing wave of anticlimax, far more brutal than the fleeting sound of the salesman's car the day before. The absurdity of the scene was a fresh, searing mockery of my vigil. A man had traveled possibly hundreds of miles on a bicycle through this unforgiving landscape, only to appear at the moment I was most exposed, most vulnerable to external stimuli. I stood there, exposed on the rise, simply watching. The cyclist saw me. He paused, his bright helmet catching the sun. He raised a hand in a small, tentative wave. He was exhausted, dehydrated, clearly lost or misguidedly adventurous. I didn't wave back. I couldn't move. I felt pinned to the earth by the sheer weight of his inappropriate presence. He was a symbol of pointless, relentless forward motion in a world that I had frozen in time. The cyclist seemed to take my stillness as a sign of indifference or perhaps hostility. He lowered his hand, took a massive gulp from a plastic bottle, and began pedaling again, his chain resuming its mournful clack-clack-clack as he crept past the dust bowl hold fast. He was gone in minutes, swallowed by the curve of the road to a dry creek junction, leaving behind only the faintest echo of dust, far less than a motorized vehicle. I stayed on the rise long after the sound vanished, breathing heavily, trying to process the emotional whiplash. The universe was not sending me a sign of Quentin's return. It was sending me tourists, salesmen, and eccentric travelers, anything and everything but the thing I waited for. It was a cosmic joke played out daily on the stage of County Route 49. This unexpected encounter, more jarring than the day before, brought a dangerous clarity. I was not just waiting for Quentin. I was waiting for the world to stop moving so I could catch up, or for the world to confirm my choice to remain fixed. And yet, the world persisted in its randomness, indifferent to my sacrifice. I moved through the living room, heading directly for the door. I retrieved the brimmed Stetson from the peg. The hat felt familiar, heavy, a perfect fit for my large, scarred hands. I placed it gently on the small table by the door and went back for the small leather pouch I kept, hidden under the floorboard near my bedside. Inside the pouch was Quentin Vance's faded photograph. It was a snapshot from his 21st birthday. He was grinning awkwardly, holding a beer, his intense eyes looking directly into the camera, full of that restless energy. I sat on the edge of the chair, examining the photograph in the fading light. Over the years, I have not only held this picture, I have studied it, searching for clues, for premonitions. Did I miss a sign in his eyes then? Was the impulse already there, the deep, undeniable need to flee? I realize now that my vigil on the worn wooden porch is not about watching the road. It's about being seen by the road. I am performing for the landscape, demanding that it acknowledge the injustice, demanding that it cough up my son, or at least explain where he went. I tucked the photograph securely under the crown of the brimmed Stetson, a symbolic protection of the memory. The porch felt rough under my feet. The wood is so worn now that the grain is smooth in places where I always stand, and splintered where the sun hits hardest. I lowered myself onto the chair I have occupied every day for 7 years. It is a simple, heavy rocker, now perfectly molded to the shape of my frame. I placed the brimmed Stetson meticulously on my lap, ensuring the photograph inside would not be crushed. My hands settled on either side of the hat, palms down, anchoring it. I was in position. The heat of the day was being exhaled by the dry earth, creating a warm updraft that carried the scent of creosote bush and dry sage. The world was quiet again, but this time it was the charged quiet of expectation, not the dead quiet of midday. My eyes scared Aya's eyes, blue and fixed, locked onto the endless ribbon of County Route 49. It was stretching before me, turning from pale tan to a deep, ruddy copper color as the sun dipped toward the horizon. This time, the vigil felt different. The random intrusion of the cyclists had disrupted the clean, emotional slate I usually started with. I wasn't just hopeful. I was defensive. I felt the need to impose my will on the silence, to demand a resolution, one way or the other, as the sun began to touch the distant peaks, painting the underside of the few clouds in violent shades of orange and magenta. The light across the road became dramatically theatrical. Everything was thrown into sharp relief. This is the hour of deceit. The shadows are long and deceptive. I strained my eyes trying to pierce the optical illusions. A slight depression in the road surface, looks like the front bumper of a vehicle. A cluster of scrub brush looks like a figure standing still. I focused on a point on the horizon, where the road finally meets the impossible sky. My vision, even with the intense focus, is unreliable. I blinked, trying to clear the haze, willing my aging eyes to perform one last, perfect act of perception. I began the internal monologue. I never speak aloud, the one directed straight to Quentin, through the conduit of the road. Are you stuck? Did something happen to the truck? Did you lose your way? Did you simply get tired of fighting and decide to settle down? The cruelest realization is that if he is alive, and if he is happy elsewhere, he has probably constructed an elaborate rationalization for why he cannot return. He would believe he is protecting me from the truth, that my life and his future are mutually exclusive. The silence grew heavier. The wind dropped entirely. In the total absence of sound, the smallest sensory detail becomes amplified. The rasp of my own breathing, the slow, heavy thump of my heart against my ribs. The climax. It happened not on the road, but in the air, a devastating sensory attack that exploited my vulnerability. From the south, where the road leads, a sudden, powerful updraft of wind kicked up. It was not the sighing, familiar wind of the desert. This was a localized, concentrated burst, a small tornado, a dust devil. It formed precisely over the strip of road I was watching, whipping the dry clay and gravel into a frenzied, terrifying vertical column. It was a perfect, blinding, chaotic curtain of dust, and for a full, horrifying 20 seconds, it looked exactly, precisely, like a massive, high-speed vehicle approaching, obscured by its own plume. The psychological impact was instantaneous and overwhelming. My body surged forward in the chair. Every muscle tightened. My hands clamped down on the brimmed Stetson, crushing the dry felt. This is it. My mind screamed the words. Not a salesman, not a cyclist. This is the real thing. Too much dust, too much speed, too much sudden energy for anything else. I leapt to my feet, the chair rocking violently behind me. The sudden movement sent a jolt of pain through my knees, but I ignored it. I stood on the worn wooden porch, one foot slightly ahead of the other, leaning forward into the invisible force field of the dust. My eyes streamed, partly from the effort, partly from the dust in the air, but mostly from the sudden, powerful pressure of tears that finally, violently, broke through the armor of 7 years. I opened my mouth, a dry, choked sound escaping. I couldn't form his name. I could only stand witness to the approaching cloud. I saw the top of the dust column separate and begin to dissipate in the higher atmosphere, twisting and reforming. The base, however, remained solid, swirling rapidly, moving with frightening speed directly toward the homestead. I raised my hand instinctively, not in a greeting, but in a desperate, protective gesture, as if I could ward off the pain that was coming. "Quentin, you fool, you took too long." The sound of the dust devil itself was a loud, hollow roaring, a sound that mimics the deep thrum of a heavy engine struggling uphill. For those agonizing seconds, the sound, the light, the sight would confirm the miracle. Then, just as the dust devil reached the exact midpoint between the horizon and the dust bowl hold fast, the vortex collapsed. It didn't slow down, didn't stop. It simply detonated inward, spreading its contents horizontally. The thick, churning column became a flat sheet of red dust, instantly revealing the empty road beneath. There was no car, no truck, no man, just the wind, playing its final, cruelest trick of the day. The sudden, brutal decompression left me standing alone, breathing in air thick with the memory of the illusion. The roaring sound died down to the regular, tired sigh of the wind. The silence that followed was so deep, so absolute, that it felt like the world had inhaled and forgotten to exhale. I did not weep openly. The tears dried instantly on my weathered cheeks, leaving twin trails of salt and dust. The intense pain in my chest was worse than the pain in my knees. It was the feeling of a profound, spiritual cavity being ripped open. I staggered back slightly, my hand finding the rough railing of the worn wooden porch. I couldn't sit down immediately. I had to stand there, physically absorbing the failure, letting the full force of the disappointment wash over me. That dust devil was the most substantial thing to appear on County Route 49 in months. And it was nothing but air and dirt, a physical manifestation of my own chaotic hope. Slowly, carefully, I lowered myself back into the rocker. I was shaking violently, an earthquake contained entirely within my aged frame. I looked down at the brimmed Stetson. My grip had been so fierce that the brim was slightly crumpled. I smoothed it out with trembling fingers, feeling the outline of Quentin's faded photograph beneath the fabric. The sun was now fully gone, leaving only the lingering glow of twilight. The road was fading into an indistinguishable grey mass. The vigil was over. It had failed again. The failure today was existential. The near climax proved that my senses, my only remaining tools, could be easily fooled, manipulated by the very elements I thought I understood. My dedication was not enough to conjure reality. I sat there, motionless, letting the last of the light drain from the sky. The dust bowl, hold fast, became a dark, solid silhouette against the deepening purple. I remembered the deputy's words. People don't just disappear. They either decide to stay gone, or... The dust devil had forced me to confront the third possibility, that Quentin had been reduced to the elements I was now covered in dust and wind, scattered and uncollectible. But I cannot allow that conclusion. The instant I accept his death is the instant I stop waiting, and stopping the wait means extinguishing the last functional part of my heart. The night settled, bringing with it the cold indifference of the millions of stars beginning to prick the black sky. I stood again, the ritual of the ending vigil now as demanding as the beginning. I picked up the brimmed Stetson, careful now, and held it against my chest. I walked inside, leaving the worn wooden porch to the wind and the darkness. I locked the door, throwing the heavy bolt, a pointless gesture in this isolation, but a necessary finality to the day. In the kitchen, under the weak light of the single electric bulb I allowed myself to use, I found a clean cloth and began the slow, tedious work of wiping the fine red dust from my clothes, my face, and my hands. I was literally cleaning the residue of my disappointment. As I finished, I went to the window and looked out at the road again, now invisible in the darkness, existing only as a concept, a memory of possibility. I won't move to Dry Creek Junction. I won't turn my back. I am Jedediah, and my faith in my son is more robust than logic, more enduring than the landscape. He told me he would return, and I, the stubborn, unmoving rock, will wait here until that happens. I climb the stairs to my room. Before lying down, I take the photograph from the hat. I hold the small, rectangular piece of paper under the bedside lamp, studying Quentin's grinning face. I trace the line of his jaw, the shape of his eyes. "You'll come back, won't you, son?" I whisper into the heavy silence of the room. It's not a question asked of him, but a promise made to myself. I replace the photograph, secure in the Stetson, and place the hat on the chair beside the bed, ready for the morning. I lie down, fully clothed, beneath the thin blanket. I close my eyes. Sleep will come, but it will be haunted. It will be shallow. I will dream of dust clouds and engines, and I will wake at the first hint of cold light, driven by the unwavering, painful mandate of my paternal love. My vigil is my legacy. I will not let the silence claim him. I will be on that porch, waiting, tomorrow and the day after, a defiant monument on the edge of County Route 49, until the cycle of dust, wind, and waiting is finally, irrevocably broken. Like, subscribe, and let's hang out again soon.